I'm going to tell you a short history of the Microbiota Vault, and apologies if it's incomplete in details. So I started my research in the Amazon in 1992, and my last time I went there was 2017. I um, fell in love with the research, with the nature, and with the people, and the nature of the people in projects that I felt, as they did, beneficial for both parts. And on the left side, you can see Sanema Yanomami looking at a video that explains what is malaria with images prepared by Universidad Central de Venezuela. And this work has been hard and continues, and despite the very hard conditions of working in the field, we have formed a long-lasting team, especially in Venezuela, my country of birth, that we have survived all kinds of situations and political situations, and we are still a very united group of workers that still collaborate. And I want to show here two people that have been connected to this symposium. In here you have María Bevilacqua. She's been very active asking questions. She's a human ecologist working with the Yecuana peoples. And this is Oscar Noya, who couldn't give his talk yesterday. And Mónica Contreras is the person with whom I started our collection at EVIC. We started working on the microbiome together up to the day. The collection has gone through a lot during its life. We've had a revolution that, like everybody knows, that has really disrupted the peace, the infrastructure of the country, and the unity of its people. I decided to move to Puerto Rico, where every year we have a hurricane season, and sometimes these hurricanes have been quite destructive. And then I moved to New York in 2012, when I thought the collection would be a little safer, but then we had, the same month I moved to New York, we had Sandy storm, which really was the biggest threat that the collection has suffered so far. So in the midst of this feeling of having a very vulnerable situation with the collection, and also learning, as we started published in 2010 about the microbiome. So these two things together, and learning about the seed vault, which I first learned about in 2016, really created the environment and put us in a position to start doing something. We were already convinced that there is an association between urbanization and degrading the microbiota, the diversity decreases, and immune disease is increased. And we think these two things are linked together. So many other studies that are nicely put together by Sonnenberg in this paper in Science also show that relevant functions are also disbalanced with urbanization. So we have a challenge because the whole world is becoming urbanized. The Svalbard Global Seed Vault has been really the inspiration to start putting efforts on this. Kari Fowler is the father. He worked his entire life to make this dream reality, and he succeeded. And they are really our inspiration. You can see the story of the seed vault in the film Seeds of Time, which is an excellent film. There is a lot of parallels between what we are doing to the natural diversity of plants and seeds with agriculture and what we are doing to the microbes of the world with our activities. So this is the history put together. the major things. So the first thing I did was talk to the crop trust, to the seed vault people, and ask them a lot of questions. This was the first meeting, but we had posterior meetings asking questions about how they did it and what was their model. Then in 2018, I met Manuel Frankhauser. He works with the C-Ray Foundation in Switzerland. And Manuel was really the person who materialized things. We started putting together a team of pioneers. He launched the webpage. And so the collaborators team grew and is still growing. In 2018, we also published the perspective in science. This was with Rob Knight, Jack Gilbert, Martin Blazer, and myself, just throwing the idea that we have to preserve because we are losing diversity and we will need those microbes for the future of humanity to keep healthy humans. Um, we visited bunkers in the Swiss Alps with Manuel Frankhauser and Martin Blazer. Um, and then at an event organized by Bob Goodman at Rutgers, uh, I met Jorge Marcone, and Martin Blazer was also there. We met with Carrie Fowler and the ambassador to Peru. Peru plays an important role in the seed vault because of the high biodiversity. So this was a very good initiation of an incubation for that ended up in this symposium and is going to continue. We created the nonprofit Microbiota Vault in 2019 as well. And we started with a feasibility study. Um, we had an initial with an independent group that was going to study feasibility, and they did. We met in Lisbon. Then Tore Midtvedt have been making big efforts in Norway to try to have a repository there. And we met in Oslo with Dominic Kogand, Merete Gesbo, Tore Midtvedt, and Rob Knight. We had another meeting of the feasibility study in Berlin. This is all taking advantage of congresses and so on. Then we started planning workshops. And as early as in February 2020, we started talking with Indonesia. And soon after with Peru, Guatemala, and Brazil. The feasibility study was launched in 2020 in June. And in September, we saw advances in the Swiss core team. So this is the pioneer team, the very early people that agreed that this was a cause worth supporting. So we have Rob Knight, who is a very big guy in the science of producing and optimizing analysis of microbiomes. He's also a biochemist, and he's a super brilliant guy, known by everybody in the field. We have Tore Midtvedt, one of the pioneer microbiologists, pioneer in doing germ-free work, in doing fecal transplants, and it's really amazing to have him here. We have 2 Nobel Prizes in the Pioneer Vault, Rich Roberts from New England Biolabs, and Jim Heckman, who is a Nobel Prize in economics. Why? Because he's doing projections of the cost that will represent to health systems in the world with a world full of chronic diseases. Jack Gilbert is a very good scientist in the microbiome field, as is Marty Blazer. Manuel Frankhauser, I have referred to. Dominic Kogand is a scientist in the Norwegian Institute of Public Health. Mark Laforce is a scientist that has worked a lot in Africa with vaccines. Keiji Fukuda, living in Hong Kong, is been very active in WHO. And Claire Fraser is another prominent scientist of the microbiome field, currently the president of the AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science. As I said, this is the perspective. I showed this slide before. The rationale is if we are degrading the human, this is very human-centric for now. If we are degrading the human microbiome and this is linked to modern diseases, can we revert by restoring, for which we will need collections and banking of microbes. The vision of the Microbiota Vault, we are a nonprofit or foundation that want to raise funds to maintain a global backup repository that will save a backup of the microbes that are being collected in regional or local collections. We also want to help capacity building in local places. So the feasibility study was launched, and the person who directed it is Dominic Steiger, who has been in this symposium, and I have invited him to be in the discussion. They addressed in the feasibility study aspects that go from technical to legal, organizational, social and ethical and economical. The feasibility study is in our webpage of the Microbiota Vault. You can download it and read it. It was supported by the C-Ray Foundation, by the Gerber Roth Foundation, also in Switzerland. These two foundations have been really fundamental. Rutgers University has given us a lot of support for the study of the feasibility, but also in this symposium, as you know. The Gulbenkian Foundation in Portugal also supported the study. Kiel University in Germany, University of California, San Diego, the Microbiota initiative also supported. The Karolinska Institute in Sweden and CFAR, a Canadian group, all these made possible the feasibility study. So the model is relatively simple. The model is the local working collections that are everywhere globally are built by the local scientists. But the idea is to make a network, a global network, and use this symposium as part of education, but have physical collections of specimens and isolated microbes. Those samples could, if the collection decides and finds the permits, etc., they are invited to use the Microbiota Vault Cryopreservation Center as a backup for their collection. This is a one-way entry, hopefully. The central collection is just a backup. The rights of the collection are held by the owner of the samples. So only the depositor can retrieve, just like a bank. But we hope to also find funds to pay for sequencing metagenomics. So we have information of what we have in the collections. And we also hope that the local collections feed information into the data storage that we want to make global. So we want to have an open source of information that grows and grows in time so that a lot of people can do research on this data. Again, the biological samples rights belong to the local collection. In Switzerland, we already have a very recently formed emergent core team with Adrian Egli, Pascal Bonash, and Nick Bokulich. And in Norway, Tore Midbeth is working to assemble the Norwegian team with the idea of exploring having also a collection in Norway, in Svalbard. So another aspect is the international network, which we think is essential because it's both capacity building and education, and both can continue with time because we are learning more and more year by year about the microbiome and how to preserve it. So the idea is organizing these workshops 2 or 3 times a year, we will see. The first one is this one. greatly supported by Rutgers University. Um, the Microbiota Ball initiative members are contributing with the workshops, but collaborator list is growing for the Microbiota Ball. And the workshop topics will be always the same. The first session is human microbiome and what the advances in every workshop. The anthropology, ecology, and ethics by the local team, mostly what's the situation in that particular place on Earth, and the techniques used on microbiome studies. Um, so finally, I love this slide I took in New York, and it shows that together we can easily accomplish very difficult tasks that would be impossible to accomplish if you're alone. And with that, I thank you for your attention.